Hi, I'm Jay Tyler. In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer some questions. I did this a few months ago, and I've had some since then. I'm going to answer, or attempt to answer, 5 of them here. The first one is, why do my Leone RPE screws keep backing up? Well, the Leone RPE screw has a friction enhancing compound in it. And you can see this if you open up the screw several turns. You'll see this kind of a powdery white chalky looking thing in there, and that's designed to give some friction to the screw, and its purpose is to keep it from backing up. So when you get the screw, you're supposed to give it 4 turns according to the instructions, just to kind of get it going, and then screw it back. Now when you're soldering an RPE screw, if you don't protect that screw body itself with a good bit of heat protective compound like heat shield, the heat could travel down the arms into the screw and I guess melt that friction compound. I don't know. Anyway, damage it somehow, and if it's damaged, it's not going to work as well. So that might be the trouble. I suggest that you really protect the body of that RPE screw before you solder it. And I usually run the heat shield all the way up to right close to the solder joint, so I protect everything but the solder area itself. So give that a try, see if that works. Next question, why do you put mineral oil on Essex retainers? Well, I did a video on Essex retainers, and I talked about putting mineral oil on it after I disinfected them and rinse it off and blow it off. And the reason I do that is, first of all, it makes them real shiny and pretty and professional looking, but functionally it aids in the initial seating. It forms a lubricant so that it'll slide right on and right back out again the first few times you do it. And if you've ever worn one, and I have, they're really tight usually when you go in, and hard to get out. So that little bit of extra lubricant helps in getting the thing seated and unseated. That's why I do that. I did a video on setting pontics on models, and I got a comment, wooden articulating paper work better for setting pontics. Now I use a pencil. I use a leaded pencil. Actually it's graphite, it's not lead. And I just mark the saddle area real well, and then that identifies the high spots on the pontic, and I grind those off. And the question was, wooden articulating paper work better? Well, the reason I don't use it is I'm a mess with articulating paper. I would have that stuff everywhere. I mean, everything would be marked. So that's the reason I don't use it. Steve Zara commented on that. He uses zinc oxide. So whatever works for you. The idea is just to mark the high spots and cut them off. So if articulating paper, if you can do that without getting it everywhere, that's great. It would work really well. Here's one that says, my boss doesn't want me to pour wet impressions, wants them to be dry. What can I do? I did a video on pouring impressions, and I emphasized the need to break the surface tension of the impression material. You can go to that video. I talk about it quite a bit, and I show some examples of what surface tension is and all that sort of stuff. But it just makes it easier for the gypsum to go into the impression material if the surface tension is just a little bit wet. Now I can understand how somebody doesn't want it to be wet, in that it would have a greater chance of making the surface of the teeth kind of chalky-like and not as hard. You have to be real careful with the amount of moisture you put on the impression. There are products out there like sprays that you can get that will lubricate the models, and they will work as well too. But if your boss is insistent on you using a bone dry impression material and pouring the plaster into it, you could thin the plaster out a little bit, but you really want your plaster mixture to be accurate and not too diluted. That'll make it weak too. But you could go just a little bit on the thinner side. And another thing you can do is you can take a brush, like I show in the video, and go in there and let the brush help get the plaster into all the places, and try to, keep from getting bubbles that way. So just take your time, go real slowly, one side, walk it all the way around to the other side, and then build up your base. All right, let's see. And the last question, why can't I use spring hard wire for labial bows? Well, you can, that's fine. Spring hard wire has a high elasticity and a low tensile strength, and those are the 2 properties we look for in wires. I mean, there's other properties, but those 2, it's either going to be springy or it's going to not be so springy. If it's not so springy, it's going to have a greater tensile strength, which means it's going to be stronger, which means it's going to be less apt to break. especially when it goes into the acrylic, and where there's, like, if you work the wire kind of hard, there's going to be tool marks. Those places are going to be weak spots. And if you're using a spring hard wire, there's a good chance it's going to break. It will break quicker than a wire that has a higher tensile strength. Now, if you have a case where you're closing diastemas in the interiors, it's good to have a spring wire, but just beware, it's, probably going to break, or it's got a greater chance of breaking than one that's not. I use a cobalt alloy wire, which doesn't have a lot of elasticity to it, but it's got a tremendous tensile strength, and I don't get labial bow breakage. If the teeth are already aligned and there's no spaces to close or no rotations to make or anything, if you're just holding them, if it's a true retainer and not an active orthodontic appliance, then the higher tensile strength, lower elastic wire with lower elasticity works just fine. All right, that's all I've got for this video. I'll see you next time.